Matchmaking in Overwatch is awful, it keeps screwing me over and it's just impossible for me to rank up with all the shitters I have to play with and how little SR I gain for any win. But is it really that unfair? Hey, what's up guys, Discount Force back in the house, and today we are going to talk about the Overwatch matchmaking and SR distribution systems. With Ranked now taking a break getting ready for the upcoming Season 4, I thought it would be a good time to talk about some of the systems that create our ladder experience. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to have a more rationally based discussion on this, which is always difficult when you just come out of the ranked session that you feel screwed you over. But hey, that should be a non-issue now with the season downtime, right? You're funny, Cliff. Expect the people on the internet to be reasonable. At any rate, I know that this is a very emotionally fueled discussion for a few reasons. For one thing, not everyone understands or cares to understand how difficult it is to create a good matchmaking system. Furthermore, it is impossible to make the perfect matchmaker that nobody complains about, and since every system has flaws, there are inevitably going to be some players who get screwed over by it more than others. What I want you to understand going into this discussion is that, but I got fucked by the matchmaking system is not a valid argument. Out of the millions upon millions of players who bought Overwatch, your individual experience is not representative for how the system performs as a whole. Despite me saying that, this video is going to contain a lot of my personal opinion and experiences. I mean, it's my effing channel, what did you expect? However, I'm going to try my best to leave edge case scenarios and emotionally fueled opinions out of the equation as much as possible and simultaneously try to take the developer's perspective into consideration. With all this being said, there's one post in particular that I'm going to be referring to a whole bunch, if not reading out almost the entire thing bit by bit. That means that there's going to be a lot of text floating on this screen, but if you don't want to listen to me read it out, the link to the post from Jeff Kaplan can be found down in the description below. All in all, this video is probably going to be very dry. I'm going to say a bunch of things you either don't like hearing or you don't care about, and if you don't think that you'll be interested in any of this, I appreciate you clicking on this video, but you might want to tune out now. So with one of the longest intros in the history of Terios gaming out of the way, let's get right into it. Let's try to get the basics out of the way first. What is a matchmaking system, what is it responsible for, and how does it work? Well, the matchmaking system is responsible for our ranked experience in that its job includes finding teammates and opponents of roughly the same skill level as us. There are a lot of challenges the system has to overcome in order to achieve that, but some of the things it bases its choices off of include the following. Get you a match quickly, get you a match with your lowest possible ping, get you a match with as close to equal group size as possible on both teams, get you a match with equally skilled players on both teams. All of these sound rather straightforward, except for the last one. How does the matchmaking system know how skilled a player is? Well, for that we got the matchmaking rating, or MMR for short. But before we dive into this, yes, there are far more factors that the matchmaking algorithm takes into consideration, but we're trying to keep this as simple as possible, and beyond those points all we can do is speculate. Jeff Kaplan has also confirmed, and I quote, "There is no assistance to win or lose. This is misinformation. We match based on skill, ping, and group size. The only thing we do is detect when one team has been repeatedly losing and is outmatched, and then we disband those matches." He also tries to give us a little insight into the matchmaking system. We've been following all the discussion around matchmaking. When topics get discussed in the community, and often among game developers, we tend to talk about things in very black and white or right and wrong terms. But most important decisions you make as a game developer are difficult trade-off decisions with no perfect answer. The goal of the matchmaking system is to make it so you as a player do not have to find 11 other people to play with. You can click a play button and the system finds other players for you. That's the basics, but reality is the matchmaker is extremely complex in what it is trying to do. It does way more than I'm going to mention in this post, so while I'm going to offer some information here, I'm leaving some of the things out. Not intentionally, it's just a really complex system. He goes on to talk about one of the first factors of matchmaking being the time it takes to find a game, as we discussed earlier. Furthermore, while players would initially say that they don't care about how long it takes to find a game as long as that match is well balanced, they have observed players voicing very clear dissatisfaction upon hitting a certain threshold when waiting to find a match, as well as the individual perception of what makes a better or good match experience. The idea that the longer they wait for a match, the better it will be is completely false. If I were to summarize match results into 5 broad buckets, it would be these. 1. My team won. We beat the other team by a long shot. 2. My team barely won. 3. My team barely lost. 4. My team lost. We lost by a long shot. It wasn't even close. 5. It was a broken match somehow. Maybe someone disconnected, was screwing around, or we played with fewer than 12 people. Of course there are more cases than this, I'm oversimplifying here. While most players would claim that they want a match that is either type 2 or 3 because those sound like the most even matchups, losses are still largely connected to a negative experience, and if a player was to barely lose continuously, that would still not make for a very fun evening. Obviously winning is usually more fun than losing. In short, even when players have a tendency for theoretically favoring very close matchups, at the end of the day they still expect to win most of their games, resulting in even a fair number of close losses to be considered a negative experience. Before we get into the part of his post where he talks about MMR, Jeff highlights that there is a a lot more going on under the hood that he could explain in a single post, so don't take this as a comprehensive guide on how the MMR is calculated in Overwatch. In Overwatch, whether your MMR goes up or down is contingent on winning or losing, but there are a number of factors that determine how much that rating goes up or down. For example, what map you're playing on and whether you were attacking or defending is factored in. We know the win rates on attack and defense on all the maps and we normalize accordingly. Not all wins and losses are equal. We also look at your individual performance of each of the heroes you played during that match. Everyone has better and worse heroes and we have tons of data showing us what performance levels should be like on those heroes. We also look at your opponents and whether or not their matchmaking rating is higher or lower than yours. These are just a few of the things that are considered when determining how your skill should go up or down. At no point in the MMR calculations do we look at your win-loss ratio, and win-loss ratio is never used to determine who to match you with or against. We are not trying to drive your win-loss percentage towards a certain number, although the fact that so many people are at 50% win rates makes us extremely happy. All the system does when it comes to matching on skill is attempt to match you with people of a similar number. The system is of course deeper than this. There are penalties and handicaps added for things like not playing for a while or playing in groups of varying sizes. So let's try to put this into perspective a little bit. The game takes you, the average Overwatch player, and looks at your history of games. It assigns an MMR value to the performance metrics it has access to based on that history. For the sake of simplicity, let's say that the placement matches were that starting history it bases its calculations on. This is where I'm going to incorporate my own experience into the theory of this. So you are a new player in Overwatch and throughout your leveling process to get to 25 you played about 100 matches. Let's say you have a good bit of shooter experience which helps you perform a little bit better than the average new player that never touched an FPS before. Since you have no track record, the matchmaking system will pair you up with very high ranked players while you're leveling up, since the other newcomers were no challenge for you. Eventually, through the course of those 100 matches, you would have had a good bit of experience playing against completely new players, then masters and grandmasters, and eventually end off playing against platinums. Because that's where, based on your performance and win-loss ratio throughout those 100 matches, the matchmaking system thinks you would fit in best to provide a balanced experience for everyone you play with and against. So since the latest season is the first you ever participated in, let's go with season 3 for the sake of argument. The competitive matchmaker has no choice but to borrow data from the quick play matchmaker that usually functions completely separated. You play your 10 players and matches against a variety of platinum and diamond ranked players and have now created a track record for the competitive matchmaker to end you up with a 2800 SR. What's important to know is that your MMR does not try to reward you in any way, shape or form. As Jeff said, win-loss ratio are not factors it takes into consideration. That's what the SR distribution system is for. It takes a variety of information and uses that to determine how much SR you deserve to get per match. In doing that, it also borrows a lot of info from the very matchmaking system. The amount of SR you get is a result of complicated calculations. The game takes a look at your own performance on the heroes that you played and compares that to how other players on the same hero around your rank have performed. If you played Soldier 76 and you're equally as good or even better than the average soldier around 2800 SR, you'll be rewarded with more SR. If you consistently perform that well on this character, maybe it is your main, the rewards get even higher because the game assumes that your good performance was not based off of luck, but based on the fact that you're just really good with that hero and thus could probably perform in a higher rank if you were playing that hero. But of course there are more factors. Maybe in this particular match the average SR of your team was higher than that of the enemy team, increasing the theoretical chance of your team winning. This takes a bit away from the SR gained depending on how big the discrepancy is. Let's say that you were playing on Volskaya and let's assume that statistically the defenders have an easy time on the second point of that map, which is where you managed to break through during your attack round but the enemies didn't. If the MMR system figures that the reason they did not manage to get that point were based on players on the enemy team underperforming on their main heroes, or maybe they didn't even get to play their main heroes, then that diminishes the amount of SR you get because there wasn't technically an even matchup, meaning you get less SR. We could keep going with this and add every little last detail of the match that could affect the amount of SR you gain. Long story short, while all this is speculation, it is obvious that there's a lot of calculation that goes into how much SR you are rewarded. But how does your SR relate to your MMR? Well, to put it simply, the SR is far more generous with rewarding you than your MMR. If you're on a win streak, the SR distribution system assumes that your gameplay, whatever you're doing, helps you and your team winning. Your rank increases as a result. It does that because it is always concerned with keeping good players in ranks that are too low, which will make for a bad experience for those having to face off against them. But your MMR, that observes and calculates far more. Again, I'll try to put my idea into simple terms. Let's say that the MMR value is scaled from 1 to 5000 just like the SR does. Assuming that your MMR and SR are both on the 3500 value, your SR gain-loss ratio would reflect that the game tries to keep you around that 3500 rank. Your gameplay performance has not changed much for either the better or for worse, so you gain very little SR after crossing 3.6k to make sure you're not not match against people who outperform you, but you gain more when dropping below 3.5k to make sure you don't stomp on people who are way worse. And that happens until your MMR value changes, which it only does if your performance either significantly improves or does the opposite. So let's say that despite the fact that the SR distribution system tries to keep you around 3500 based on your MMR's recommendation, you manage to perform well enough to stay around 3700, even though you keep losing more SR than you gain. If this trend continues, the MMR system will slowly follow through and adjust the value accordingly. Win and losing streaks are the game's emergency failsafe. If a player wins a lot of matches in a row, the game is going to assume that they are better than the player they are currently matched up against. To avoid this player just staying around that rank and ruining the balance by stomping on people who don't have a chance against them, winning streaks have been implemented to get them into a higher rank where they can then prove that they have what it takes to play in that higher SR. And obviously something similar to this relates to losing streaks. However, not every winning or losing streak is based on a massive skill discrepancy. It can very well happen simply due to luck or the lack thereof. And that's exactly what the MMR tries to fix, because the MMR, unlike the SR, doesn't believe that you belong to a higher rank based on a mere 5-game winning streak, meaning your performance is still measured individually and your MMR value is being tweaked accordingly, but nowhere near as harshly as your SR value. That means that a player who performs considerably better than he did before would see a more generous SR bonus for the same winning streak as someone who was just getting lucky. Obviously, again, all this is way oversimplified speculation. In reality, a 200 SR discrepancy is negligible and does not indicate a massive skill discrepancy. But enough guesswork, let's get back to what Jeff has to say about this. For better or for worse, we focus the design of the game on winning or losing as a team. Overwatch is not a game where you ignore the objectives and then look at your KD ratio to determine how good you are. We want you to focus on winning or losing, and as a result, you do focus on winning or losing. We try to make it so that losing is not the end of the world, but to a lot of people they expect to win far more than they lose. I sometimes wonder if we were able to clone you 11 times and then put you into a match against yourself, would you be happy with the outcome, even if you lost? Out of the 5 types of matches I described above, it is my belief that you would still experience types 1 to 4. Are those stomps still not acceptable? Because they will happen. He goes on to describe matches where it seemed like the matchmaking system was off on the surface, but really it just came down to how the game is designed in conjunction with how the players handle it. A match on King of the Hill where you get stomped on the first round, stomp on the second, and then have a 99-99 overtime on the last round. Or a match where you seem to get absolutely destroyed until 2 players swap their heroes. Matches can go very quickly from what feels like a stomp in one direction to the opposite direction. It is also my own belief that a game is never lost midway through. Players have a huge selection of heroes and strategies to take advantage of and can turn a game around that seemed unwinnable at first. And I quote, "So while it is possible for a mismatch to result in a stomp, not every stomp is a mismatch. If every time a team dominates another team it is viewed as the matchmaker is broken, the problem we have is with perception and expectation. Look across all pro sports. Even matches happen every night, stomps happen every night. It's a reality of any competitive game. Does that make being on the receiving end sting any less? Probably not. So if you ask me, the reality of it all is that for most of the things people complain about, there are valid reasons for why they're happening. My own experience, while also cursed with unfortunate experiences like losing a ton of SR when I'm solo supporting while my team trolls, has also largely been very pleasant. Most of the time I understood perfectly why I got the amount of SR that I did because I could reflect on my own performance of the last few matches. Not everyone is an edge case scenario where the matchmaking system breaks specifically on them and they play in Platinum though they're good enough for Masters or something. But people don't like to be told that they're bad, let alone realize that their MMR suggests that they belong to a lower rank, and that MMR was created based on their own performance, so at the end of the day they got nobody to blame but themselves. What I try to preach on this channel every single time is that Overwatch is an incredibly versatile game. There's more to it than getting kills and comparing medals. There are tons of missed opportunities to turn matches around and a lot of negative talk without even bothering to show any interest in the complexity of the systems they curse so very much. But you know what? I'm not here to care about that. People who just brainlessly curse the matchmaking systems for their own poor performance won't be persuaded by a video like this anyway, and it's not like this is my goal. At the end of the day, I just found this a very interesting topic to talk about and just like to share my own theories on what I think the MMR system works like. Don't forget to drop me a like anyway if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and I hope to see you all next time.
She's sleeping. Go for her, she's still sleeping.
I did something stupid.
I saw.
Don't mention it.
I won't.